to some of the previous instances in which Uranus goes into the orbit of Gemini, and I am revisiting this because there are many other instances apart from World War II, American Revolutionary War, Civil War, because I was just researching the book of Esther, and the book of Esther is in the Bible, and my hand, by the way, I don't know if you can see the redness, but I got stung by bees on both sides, but this one is I was out in the apiary today, so this one's super swollen still because I got stung right in the sweet spot, I guess. So I'm just dealing with that. Plus, all the venom went into it because I couldn't take my gloves off. I was in the middle of being attacked by the whole swarm. I got to do something about that hive. So, but yeah, I was studying the book of Esther, and there are books in Esther that are not in the normal Bible, but they're in another, like the Catholic Bible, and so they're very interesting because they talk about a red dragon and a white dragon fighting in the heavens over dominion of earth. So take that for what it is. Let's dive right in because this is a bit of a doozy. Okay, so my question to Grok was, in the book of Esther, there's speculated to be lost chapters at the end of that depict a red dragon and a white dragon. Oh, I was also stung on the foot too. Warring in the heavens over dominion of earth. Can we explore this in more detail? I only know the surface level stuff because someone told me about it. Okay, Grok's response. The idea of lost chapters in the book of Esther involving a red dragon and a white dragon warring in the heavens over dominion over the earth likely stems from apocryphal and deuterocanonical texts associated with the book of Esther, specifically in Greek additions to Esther found in the Septuagint. These additions, sometimes referred to as the additions to Esther, are not included in the Hebrew Masoretic text, which forms the basis of the canonical book of Esther in most Protestant Bibles. However, they are included in the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles and contain additional material, including a dream of Mordecai that features dragons. Let's explore this in detail, addressing the speculation, the context of these additions, and the relevance to the dragon imagery you mentioned. Background on the Book of Esther and its additions. The Book of Esther, as found in the Hebrew Bible, is a narrative set in Persian Empire, focusing on Esther, a Jewish woman who becomes queen and, with her cousin Mordecai, saves her people from a genocidal plot by the king's advisor, Haman. The Hebrew version is concise, focusing on the historical and political drama without explicit supernatural elements. However, the Greek Septuagint version of Esther, used by early Christians and Hellenistic Jews, includes 6 additional sections labeled A through F in modern scholarship that expand the narrative with more overtly religious and visionary context. These additions are considered apocryphal by Protestant traditions, but cannot canonical in Catholic and Orthodox traditions. One of these editions, specifically Edition A, sometimes called The Dream of Mordecai, contains the imagery of dragons that may relate to the speculation about a red and white dragon warring in the heavens. This passage is often cited as the source of the dragon imagery associated with Esther. The Dream of Mordecai, Edition A. In Edition A, found in the beginning of the Greek Esther, Esther 11 verses 2 through 12 in some Catholic Bibles, or Prologue A in others. Mordecai, a prominent Jewish figure in the Persian court, has a dream that foreshadows the event of the book. The text, as translated in the New Revised Standard Version (NRSV) with Apocrypha, describes the dream as follows. Okay, here we go. Here's the dream. In the second year of the reign of Artaxerxes the Great, on the first day of Nisan, Mordecai, son of Jar, son of Shemai, son of Kish, of the tribe of Benjamin, had a dream. He saw a Jew living in the city of Susa, a great man, serving in the court of the king. He was one of the captives whom King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had brought from Jerusalem with King Jeconiah of Judah. And this was his dream. Noises and confusion, thunders and earthquakes, tumult on the earth! ! Then the two great dragons came forward, both ready to fight. They roared terribly. At their roaring, every nation prepared for war, to fight against the righteous nation. It was a day of darkness and gloom, of tribulation and distress, affliction and great tumult on earth! And the whole righteous nation was trembled. They feared the evils that threatened them, and were ready to perish. Then they cried out to God, and at their outcry, as though from a tiny spring, there came a great river with much water. The light and the sun rose, and the lowly were exalted and devoured those who were held in honor. The lowly were exalted and devoured those who were held in honor. Okay. When Mordecai saw this in his dream, and what God had determined to do, he awoke. He kept in mind and tried by every means to understand it until night. Okay. So that was the dream passage. Now let's kind of okay, let me take a sip real quick. I mowed the lawn today, and I took care of the bees. I'm a bit parched. This message introduces the imagery of two great dragons that are ready to fight, and whose roaring prompts nations to prepare for war against the righteous nation, understood to be the Jews. Interesting. Because it seems like Israel is under attack, either by self-provoking or not. I mean, depending on how you politically look at it. The dream is symbolic, and later in the Greek Esther, edition F, Esther 10 verses 4 through 13, Mordecai reflects on the dream, interpreting it as a divine revelation of God's plan to deliver the Jews through Esther. Analysis of the dragon imagery. The dragon in Mordecai's dream, the dragons in Mordecai's dream are not explicitly described as red or white in the text, nor is their conflict framed as occurring in the heavens, or explicitly over dominion of the earth. However, that was what I think that I wrote. However, the imagery of two great dragons fighting can evoke mythological or apocalyptic themes common in ancient literature, which may have led to speculation about a cosmic battle. Here's a breakdown of the elements. Y'all, does this not seem like we're about to have some kind of alien invasion? Dragons fighting in the sky, nations preparing to war with each other. The two dragons, I should ask later on. In fact, I'll go ahead and type it out. Do you suppose these dragons in Mordecai, how do you spell his name? In Mordecai's dreams could possibly be him astral projecting or having visions of alien battles in the sky. Okay. That's one question we can ask. Oh, Mordecai right there. A Jew, Haman, Persian. Okay. Okay, well, that's the two dragons. I think I stopped right here. Most scholars suggest they represent Mordecai and Haman, the two central antagonists. I don't know how you pronounce that. Whose conflict drives the story. Mordecai, a Jew, and Haman, the Persian official plotting against the Jews, are pitted against each other, and their struggle has cosmic implications for the fate of the Jewish people. The dragons roaring and the ensuing preparation for war symbolize the broader conflict between the Jews and their enemies. Absence of red and white colors. I don't know if this really is necessary because I just was the one who wrote red and white. I just didn't know. I heard it was red and white. The text does not specify the colors of the dragon, so the idea of a red dragon and a white dragon may stem from later interpretations, folklore, or conflation with other mythological traditions. For example, the red and white dragons appear prominently in Welsh mythology, as noted in your search results. In Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain and the Welsh Mabinogion tale, Lud and the Levies, a red dragon representing the Britons, and a white dragon representing the Saxons fight, causing great disturbance. This story is explicitly linked to the Esther editions in some analysis, as the blog post from Aliens in This World suggests, because both involve dragons fighting in a way that impacts nations' fates. The speculation about the red and white dragons may reflect a blending of these traditions or a creative interpretation of the Esther text. Interesting. I was going to gloss over this and just not even read it, but it seems like this the Kings of Britain and Lud and Lavellie's red dragon and white dragon thing is actually an interpretation of Esther. Warring in the heavens. The idea of the dragons warring in the heavens is not explicit in the Greek Esther text, which describes the dragons coming forward and causing tumult on earth. However, the dream's apocalyptic tone, featuring noises, confusion, thunder, and earthquakes, could suggest a cosmic or heavenly dimension to the conflict. This imagery aligns with other biblical and apocryphal texts, such as Revelation 12, where a red dragon, often interpreted as Satan, appears in the heavens, battling angelic forces. The speculation about a heavenly war may arise from this parallel or from later interpretive traditions that amplify the cosmic stakes of Mordecai's dream. Dominion over Earth. The the dream does not directly state that the dragons are fighting over dominion over Earth, but the conflict's impact on every nation, and the righteous nation suggests a struggle with far-reaching consequences. The dream foreshadows the threat to the Jewish people and their ultimate deliverance, which could be interpreted as a battle for their survival and, by extension, their place in God and God's plan for the world. The idea of dominion may be an embellishment or a theological interpretation emphasizing the global significance of the events. The tiny spring in the great river. The dream concludes with a tiny spring becoming a great river, symbolizing hope and deliverance. This is often interpreted as representing Esther, whose humble position as a Jewish orphan leads to her becoming queen and saving her people. The lowly being exalted and devouring the glorious further reinforces the theme, contrasting the apparent power of Haman with the divine empowerment of Mordecai and Esther. Speculation about lost chapters. Confusion with other traditions, as mentioned, the red and white dragon imagery. Apocalyptic interpretation of the dragon and Mordecai's dream may have amplified later Christian apocalyptic traditions. Popular retelling of folklore. The idea of the lost chapters may come from modern retellings. Cultural and literal connections. Ancient Near Eastern mythology. Dragons or serpentine creatures often symbolize chaos. Biblical parallels. The Book of Revelation, chapter 12, the Red Dragon. Welsh mythology, critical examination. It's worth noting that the additions to Esther, including the Red Dragon, were likely added to the Greeks' book. Conclusion: lost chapters of Esther involving a red and white dragon warring the heavens over the dominion of the earth is not supported. Okay. So, my next question was, can you check to see what significant astrological alignments were on Earth during that time? Was Uranus and Gemini during that time, like we are experiencing today? To address your question about significant astrological alignments on Earth during the time of the Book of Esther, particularly whether Uranus was in Gemini, we need to establish the historical context of the Esther narrative, identify the relevant astrological period, and examine planetary alignments focusing on Uranus and Gemini. Since the Book of Esther does not provide explicit dates, we'll rely on historical and biblical scholarship to estimate the time period, then use astrological data to analyze the alignments. I'll also incorporate the provided search results where relevant, especially regarding Uranus and Gemini, which is noted as occurring in 2025. Historically, during periods like 1941 and 1949, World War II, 1858 to 1866, Civil War, 1774 to 1782, I don't know. I'm sure that's the Revolutionary War, something like that. Historical context of the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther is set in Persian okay, this is actually, I'm going to read this because this is pretty interesting, because if you note, the ring that I wear, that I love so much, is from this period. It's like thousands of years old. And yes, I wear it, and I'm not taking it off. I got it from a historical auction. And I also have it's a Greek, Athenian era, Cleisthenian era, I guess you could call it. Xerxes' War, the Second Persian War. This is the time period from which this ring was like gotten. Anyways, the Greeks found a after the First Persian War, they knew that the Persians were going to come back because the Persians got obliterated by the sea. They tried to climb up the rocks, and the Athenians just threw boulders as they were trying to climb up, and they just got obliterated. So they knew they're going to come back. So when Xerxes took over Persia, he came to defeat Greece again, and during that time, the Greeks found a massive amount of silver, and they became rich, and they also sold a lot of silver to build their trireme naval fleet, and they became the rulers of the Mediterranean. Okay, so historical context of the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther is set in Persian Empire, likely during the reign of King Ahasuerus. Commonly identified by scholars as Xerxes the First, reigned 486 to 465 BCE. The narrative describes events involving Esther, Mordecai, and Haman, culminating in the Jewish people's deliverance from a genocidal plot. While the exact dates are debated, most scholars place the events around 483 to 473 BCE. Based on the reference of Xerxes the First in Esther's 1:1 and historical correlations with Xerxes the First's reign. Oh, Xerxes. That's how you spell Xerxes. Xerxes. Duh. Okay, so this is right from... So this ring is from when Esther was around, by the way. So that's pretty cool, too. Sorry, my little thing is going off in the background, but hopefully it'll stop soon. It won't. It sings a whole song. Okay, so Xerxes the First reign. Xerxes and I guess Xerxes the Second. Okay, well, anyways, some propose a later date under Artaxerxes the First, 465 to 424 BCE, but the consensus leans towards Xerxes the First. For this analysis, I'll use 483 to 473 BCE as the primary time frame, with a secondary consideration of 465 to 424 to cover the likely period of the Esther narrative. The mention of lost chapters involving a red and white dragon warring in the heavens, as described in your previous query, likely refers to the additions to Esther in the Greek Septuagint, particularly Mordecai's Dream, Edition A, which includes 2 dragons. This dream is symbolic, but your question about astrological alignments suggests an interest in whether celestial events during this period might have influenced or been interpreted as significant, possibly relating to the dragon imagery. Astrological context and Uranus and Gemini. Uranus in modern astrology is associated with innovation, revolution, disruption, and sudden change. It spends approximately 7 years in each zodiac sign, completing an 84-year orbit around the sun. So it takes 84 Earth years around the sun for one Uranus orbit. The search results indicate that Uranus will be in Gemini from July 7th, 2025 to May 22nd, 2033, with a brief retrograde in Taurus from November 7th to April 26th. And historically, Gemini during periods like 1941 to 1949, 1858 to 1866, 1774 to 1782, to determine if Uranus was in Gemini during the Esther period, circa 483 to 473, or 465 to 424, we need to calculate its position based on orbital cycle. Calculating Uranus's position, Uranus's 84-year cycle means it moves through the zodiac roughly every 7 years per sign. To find its position in the 5th century BCE, we can work backward from known historical transits. The search results provide specific dates for Uranus in Gemini, such as 1858 to 66, 1774 to 82, which are 84 years apart, confirming the cycle's regularity. Additionally, a source notes a significant Uranus-Neptune-Pluto conjunction in Taurus around 578 to 577 BCE, suggesting Uranus was in Taurus at that time. Let's estimate Uranus's position for 483 to 473 BCE. 578 to 577 BCE, Uranus was in Taurus, 8 to 10 degrees Taurus, per the conjunction date. Uranus moves through one sign approximately every 7 years. From 578 BCE to 483 BCE, it's about 95 years, or roughly 1.13 cycles. 95 divided by 84 equals 1.13. After completing one full cycle, 84 years, Uranus would return to Taurus around 494 to 487 BCE. 578 minus 494 equals 84 years. By 483 BCE, it would have moved slightly forward, likely into Gemini or Cancer, depending on the exact timing, using the 7 year per sign approximation. So, 571 to 564 BCE was Gemini. 487 to 480 BCE was Gemini. Thus, during the likely Esther period, 483 to 473, Uranus was likely in Gemini around 487 to 480 and transitioned into Cancer around 480 for the secondary period, 465 to 424. We'll continue the cycle here. So during the 465 424 BCE, Uranus was likely to be in Virgo through Aquarius, not Gemini. Therefore, Uranus was likely in Gemini only in the early part of the primary Esther period, circa 483 to 480, under Xerxes the First. 483. Interesting. Okay. So for 3 years, this was going on. So this, technically, the Book of Esther happened. I don't know how many years this exodus of Esther and the Jewish people being freed or whatever took place, but it was smack dab in the middle of it. Verification with historical transits. These search results confirm Uranus in Gemini during later periods, 1858, 66, 1774, 1782, which align with 84-year cycles working backward. This is the verification math. significant astrological alignments during the Esther period. Since astrology in 5th century BCE was not as developed as modern astrology, which includes Uranus, discovered in 1781, the ancients focused on visible planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and their alignments, often interpreted as omens. However, since your question specifically asks about Uranus and significant alignments, I'll include Uranus and other outer planets, Neptune and Pluto, as modern astrologers retroactively analyze their positions for historical events. The search results provide insight into Uranus and Gemini's effects, but lack specific data for 483 to 473. Also, so 483, 483, 42, 41, 480. That period of time was Gemini, and during that 3 to 4 year period was Esther. I'll also consider Babylonian and Persian astrological contexts as they were relevant to the setting of Esther. Uranus and Gemini, effects of Uranus and Gemini. I think that we can probably skip over this part because, but I'll just read a little bit right here. Uranus and Gemini associated with revolutionary changes in communication, intellect, and duality. Historically, this transit coincides with significant events involving communication and societal shifts, such as the invention of the printing press and the transatlantic cable. In the context of Esther, Uranus and Gemini could symbolize intellectual and communicative breakthroughs, such as Mordecai's strategic actions to uncover Haman's plot, or Esther's persuasive diplomacy with the king. The dragon imagery of in Mordecai's dream, edition A, may reflect in this duality, as Gemini is a sign of the twins, and the two dragons could symbolize opposing forces, Mordecai versus Haman, and transformative conflict. Okay. Let's skip forward. Other planetary alignments: Jupiter, Neptune, Saturn. Babylonian, comparison, conclusion. Okay, now let's go to the next question. What other events took place during Uranus and Gemini transit that we know of? Okay, now I was asking about other Uranus and Gemini transits, like 1771 through 74, 1941 to 49, stuff like that. But Grok was thinking what other things around the world, and this is interesting. The period of 487 to 480 BCE falls within the early Achaemenid Persian Empire, a time of significant political, military, and cultural developments. The Persian Empire under Darius I and his successor Xerxes I was the dominant power in the ancient Near East, stretching from Egypt to India. The Book of Esther, set in this era, likely reflects the court dynamics and Jewish diaspora life of Persia. Below, I outline key events from this period, drawing from historical sources and correlating them with Uranus and Gemini's themes of innovation, communication, and duality, while noting any relevance to Esther narratives, dragon imagery, or broader context. So here we go. Event: Darius I, Persian king who consolidated Achaemenid Empire, died in 486, and his son Xerxes I ascended to the throne. This transition involves, so this is during this death and transition to a new king happened during Uranus being in Gemini, by the way. This transition involved stabilizing the empire after Darius' death, including addressing succession disputes and consolidating power to the royal court at Susa. Uranus and Gemini influence, connection to Esther. Okay, so next one. Egyptian revolt and suppression, 486 to 484 BCE. Event. In 486, Egypt revolted against Persian rule, likely sparked by heavy taxation and resentment toward Darius I's policies. Xerxes I Xerxes I suppressed the revolt by 484 BCE, appointing his brother Alcamenes as satrap of Egypt. I don't know what that is, like, I guess emperor or whatever. This campaign involves significant logistical and communicative efforts as the Persian Empire coordinated armies across vast distances. Okay, so Xerxes put out a big revolt. Next one, preparation for Second Greco-Persian War. Xerxes, so this, when he went to Greece following Darius's failed attempt. So between Darius and Xerxes is when I got this ring. So getting ready for war, Athenian naval reforms, this is when I got the ring. Event in Athens, Themistocles, a prominent statesman, persuaded, Cleisthenes also, he was the one who was leading the fronts, persuaded the city to use silver from the Laurian mines to build a powerful navy, anticipating the Persian invasion. Right, so he was anticipating Xerxes after Darius. This led to the construction of triremes, which are those boats that ram, which proved decisive at the Battle of Salamis, 480. Oh my gosh! The Battle of Salamis was 480 BCE. Wow. Athens also faced internal political strife with ostracism, exiles of rivals like Aristides, excuse me, in 482. This is so crazy. All this, like, I've been obsessed with that war. The war with Xerxes and the Persians and the Greeks because of the triremes, and I have this ring as proof. And this happened during a Uranus transit. So Themistocles and Cleisthenes. Cool. Okay, cultural and intellectual developments in Greece. Event. The early 5th century BCE was a formative period for Greek culture, marking the transition from the archaic to the classical period. Philosophers like Heraclitus, active earlier but influential, emphasized change and duality, while earlier tragedians like Aeschylus began performing in Athens. The Delphic oracle also played a key role, offering cryptic prophecies about Persian invasion. Okay. So that was the, like the Oracle of Delphi was during that time as well. But if you know the story about the Persians, then that was prominent during that time and it was used a lot. Babylonian and Persian administrative reforms. Event. After suppressing the revolt in Babylon circa 484 BCE, Xerxes I reportedly destroyed the temple of Marduk and reorganized the satrapy system to strengthen centralized control. The Persian Empire's administrative efficiency, including the royal road and courier system, facilitated governance across vast territories. Interesting. Broader context and astrological themes. Uranus and Gemini's revolutionary energy. The search results consistently associate Uranus and Gemini with radical changes in communication, transportation, and societal structures. In 487 to 480 BCE, this manifested in Persia's logistical preparations for war, the Royal Roads communication network, and Athens' naval innovations. The duality of Gemini and is evident in the opposing forces of the period: Persia versus Greece, Mordecai versus Amon, and imperial versus regional revolts. Imperial control versus regional revolts. Critical examination conclusion. During the Uranus Gemini transit of approximately 487 to 480 BCE, key events included the transition of Darius to Xerxes, the suppression of Egyptian revolts, preparations for Second Greco-Persian War, my ring, Athenian naval reforms, my ring again, Themistocles, early Greek philosophy, Persian administrative reforms. And then here's my next question. Additionally, what other events took place during the Uranus and Gemini transit during different times? For example, 1941, 1948, 1949, 1858, 1866, 74 to 82. Okay, and so it answers my question again because I had to ask it twice, but I'm glad that it thought that I was, that Grok anyways thought that I was asking it within the same time period, because I didn't realize that so many things were going on around the world during that time, and I wouldn't have known that my ring was that much more special. Anyways, Uranus and Gemini, astrological context. Uranus and Gemini is characterized by innovation, communication, technology, societal upheaval and conflict, intellectual and cultural shifts, duality versus division. Historical events during the Uranus and Gemini transits. 483 to 480 previously discussed the events Esther and also Xerxes and also Themistocles in the Greeks. Astrological significance. Okay, so that was 483 to 480. Let's go back even. Let's go closer in time. 399 to 392. Historical context. During this period falls during the late 5th century BCE, at a time of continued Greek-Persian tensions and internal Greek conflicts. The Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404, between Athens and Sparta, was nearing its end, with Sparta's victory in 404 BCE. In Athens, the trial and execution of Socrates occurred in 399, marking a pivotal moment in Western philosophy. In Persia, Artaxerxes, the second, faced challenges. Artaxerxes, I'm not quite sure how you say that name, including the rebellion of his brother Cyrus the Younger. 401, Battle of Cunaza. Events: Socrates' trial and death, end of Peloponnesian War, and also the execution of Socrates. Yeah, that's what. Then Persian internal conflicts. Okay, now let's go to 14. We just discovered 399 to 392. Now we're going to skip a bunch of years for some reason and go to 1439 to 1447. Events: Gutenberg's printing press was created, so the newspapers were created, books were created. Council of Florence. Efforts to reconcile the Catholic and Orthodox churches reflected intellectual and diplomatic exchanges, though ultimately unsuccessful. Wars and conflicts. The 100 Years' War between England and France continued, with Joan of Arc's legacy, executed 1431, still influencing French nationalism. Skirmishes and dynastic struggles in Europe reflected ongoing divisions. Astrological significance, the printing press is a quintessential Uranus and Gemini event. Okay, we can skip through. 1523 to 1530. The early 16th century marked the height of the Renaissance, beginning and the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, and a period of intellectual and religious upheaval events. Protestant Reformation, 1517. Martin Luther's 95 Theses, 1517, continued to spark religious debates, with figures like Ulrich Zwingli and John Calvin emerging in 1520s, challenging Catholic authority. Printing and literature, the spread of printed books fueled literacy and Reformation ideas, with transitions of the Bible into vernacular languages. Exploration and communication. The age of exploration saw advances in navigation and communication, with figures like Ferdinand Magellan completing the first circumnavigation of the globe, 1519 to 1522, finished by his crew. Spanish conquests in the Americas, Cortez in Mexico, 1519 to 1521, continued in the 1520s. Okay, and then so nothing too crazy so far. I mean, I guess we've seen some pretty cool stuff like the printing press. 1604, 1614, colonial expansion. The establishment of Jamestown, Virginia, 1607, marked the beginning of English colonialization. The English colonization in America. The Dutch East India Company expanded trade networks, relying on advanced communication systems. Scientific advances. Johannes Kepler published Astronomia Nova, 1609, detailing planetary motion. A breakthrough in scientific communication. Galileo Galilei's telescopes observations, 1609 to 1610, challenged established cosmology. Religious and political conflicts. The 30 Years' War in 1618 and 1648 loomed, with tensions between Catholics and Protestants escalating. The Gunpowder Plot, 1605, just before the transit, reflected religious divisions in England. Okay, next one, 1690 to 1698. First colonial post office. Okay, more communication. We're talking about printing press. We're talking about like a book revolution and book translations and Bible translations. And now we have post office, which is more communication. So communication. And war. Glorious Revolution aftermath. The establishment of constitutional monarchy in England under William and Mary stabilized governance, but heightened political divisions. War and exploration. The Irish War in 1688 to 1697 involved European powers with communication critical for military coordination. Colonial exploration continued, with figures like William Dampier exploring Australia, mate. And 1774 to 1782. Okay, this is like when people were wearing like normal clothes, like, I guess, I don't know. Maybe that wasn't even then yet. I guess we're in like the Victorian era still. Or is that before? Anyways, the 1500s. I wonder how people were dressed during this period. Must have been pretty, I don't know, not as cool as it is today. American Revolutionary War. Oh my gosh! Holy moly! Tensions escalated with the Boston Tea Party, Uranus in late Taurus. Okay, so we're we're there anyways. Leading the battles of Lexington and Concord, the Declaration of Independence, 1776, marks the United States formation. Key figures like Patrick Henry, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, 1775, and George Washington's drove revolutionary communication. The war ended with the Treaty of Paris, 1783. Dang, this is right in the middle of it. Scientific discoveries. William Herschel discovered Uranus, 1781. Holy moly. The year before this Uranus transit ended. Revolutionizing astronomy. James Watt's steam engine and other innovations marked the early industrial revolution. Intellectual advancements. Enlightenment thinkers like Pierre Simon, Laplace, and Antoine Antoine, or Antoine, I think it's Antoine, Lavoisier, Antoine Lavoisier advanced mathematics and chemistry with communications via published works. Very interesting. Okay. That was the American Revolutionary War. I think I've said that before anyways. Like way long before. Anyways, here we go. 1858, 1866, United States Civil War. Preceded by the Lincoln-Douglas debates, 1858, which elevated Abraham Lincoln's profile. The war pitted North against South, culminating the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, which is during that period anyways, and the 14th Amendment, 1865, was retro at the end of that period. Communication innovations. The first transatlantic telegraph cable, 1858, completed in 1866, which is a year after this transit, but it was during it when they... Oh, it started before and ended after. Enabled instant communication between continents. Yo, that would have been so wild. And you know what's crazy is we're getting more communication. The Pony Express, 1860, and newspapers expanded information exchange. The Carrington event, 1859, a massive solar flare disrupted telegraph systems. The Carrington event. We might even get another Carrington event. I don't know. It's not impossible. We're seeing stuff falling out of the sky today. Literature and culture. Works by Charles Dickens, Alexandra Dumas, and Leo Tolstoy flourished, with newspapers spreading ideas. Okay, let's go to the next one, 1941 to 1949. This is World War II. U.S. involvement began after Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. Uranus in Taurus, but entering Gemini in May, so 5 months later. Key events include the Battle of Midway, 1942, D-Day, 1944, which was in Gemini, and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, which was in Gemini at the later end of it. The war ended in September 1945 with Japan's surrender. Technological breakthroughs. I wonder if it's going to be communication-based. The first programmable computers. Yes, it is. ENIAC, 1945, and code-breaking efforts. Alan Turing's work revolutionized technology, radio broadcasting, and wartime propaganda expanded mass communication. Post-war changes. The GI Bill, 1944, provided education and job training for 2.2 million veterans, boosting social mobility. The Cold War began with U.S. and as a nuclear superpower. So the Cold War. Man, we were just we've been in wars after wars after wars. $12.11. Here's the 10. Okay, let's look at these ones. These were the missing ones. 1355 to 1363. The Hundred-Year War between England and France is intensified with the battles of Poitiers, 1356, the Treaty of Bretigny, 1360, temporarily paused hostilities. The Black Death's aftermath continued to reshape society, with labor shortages driving economic changes. The Black Death, that sounds like a COVID situation. Astrological significance, Uranus and Gemini likely fuel diplomatic communication, e.g. treaties, and social upheavals, with Gemini's duality reflected in England-France tensions. Connections to Esther, diplomatic efforts parallel Esther's negotiations with dragon imagery, symbolizing warring kingdoms. So now 12, we did 13, now we're doing 12. The Second Council of Lyon, 1274, aimed to unite Catholic and Orthodox churches. Marco Polo's travels to China began fostering cross-cultural communication. The Mongol Empire's invasion continued, requiring extensive communication networks. Astrological significance. Okay. 1188 to 1195. Events. Third Crusade saw European leaders like Richard the Lionheart and Saladin negotiate and fight. The spread of troubadour property and chivalric literature enhanced cultural communication. Astrology significance. Okay. Event during 1100s, the First Crusades aftermath saw establishment of crusader states requiring communication across Europe and the Levant. The investiture controversy between the Pope and Holy Roman Emperor peaked, resolving with Concordat of Worms. And then the last one, which was 1020 to 1028. Events. The early 11th century saw the consolidation of medieval kingdoms, with figures like Nut or Knut and the great ruling England, Denmark, and Norway. The spread of monastic schools enhanced education and communication. So this is interesting. The consolidation of kingdoms. I have been saying this whole time that we are going to see a consolidation of kingdoms on Earth today. During this transit. This Uranus and Gemini transit, we're going to see consolidation of kingdoms. I guarantee it. Critical notes, conclusion. Yeah. I'll just ask this quick little question, and we'll just gloss over this answer, because this is going to be speculative. But noises and confusion, thunders and earthquakes. This is the dream of Mordecai. Traditional interpretations of dragons, powerful entities, cultural resonance, astral projection, Mordecai's dream. Dream is divine communication, visionary experience, cultural barriers, alien battles in the sky, celestial phenomenon. During Uranus and Gemini, the Persians and Babylonians practiced astrology, interpreting celestial events as omens. A bright comet or meteor shower could have been seen as a battle in the sky, but no specific record of such an event exists for this period. The search results mention the Crab supernova of 1054 CE, but no equivalent as documented for 483 BCE. So yeah, I thought that we wouldn't really get anything from here. But yeah, so I just wanted to do a deeper dive into this because and this technically is just scratching the surface because you note that Grok is really only giving us answers that are relevant to somebody sitting here in Texas. What if I was sitting in China? What if I was sitting in Taiwan or Thailand or Russia or Africa? Like, what significance would would Grok be able to provide for me in those instances? Because it's very narrow, and I'm sure there's a lot of change that happened all around the world, but we're just looking at one little sliver, one narrow sort of timeline. So yeah. So what do you guys think? Let me know. And um, yeah, thank you for coming on this little deep dive with me. And if you have any questions or if you have any comments or want me to look at anything in particular, or if you want me to look at any one of these events more closely or in more detail, then I can just reopen this. It's in my history, and we can keep going. So just let me know in the comments or whatever you want. And thank you for liking the video too. I appreciate that. So you guys have a good one. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye. Have a good night. Bye bye.